We're joined by Mike DeCourcy from the Sporting News, senior writer there. Make sure you give him a follow and go to the Sporting News for coverage. I'm actually talking about another magazine right now that I saw had a story out. It was The Athletic. They did a poll of their writers. Seth Davis, Iman Brennan, let's see, Justin Williams, Austin Meek, Sam Vicini, Joe Rexroad, let's see anybody else, Tobias Bass, Brian Hamilton, Dane O'Neill, Kyle Tucker, Brian Bennett, lots of different writers. And they were trying to, the poll was, who do you think is going to be the most disappointing team this season? And Indiana won that with 4 votes. But don't fear too much, Indiana fans, because right behind them with 3 votes each were Kansas and North Carolina. So this is, and then Duke was a couple spots below that. These are the guys are just saying, well, like Seth Davis says, Hoosier fans are starving so badly for a winner that I fear this team is bound to disappoint them. He loves Trace Jackson Davis, and Race Thompson is one of his favorite glue guys, but he does not trust Xavier Johnson as a full-time point guard. And the Big Ten has plenty of good teams. If the Hoosiers lose momentum or suffer an injury or two, they could go downhill in a hurry. I do agree with the Xavier Johnson part. And I think he's a lot of people thought that the freshmen were going to be the question mark. I still think that Xavier Johnson might be the question mark.
I got some guff on Twitter last week for there was an article in the Indy Star that Matt Glenesk, who's the sports editor at the Star, tweeted out, and he said, it's obvious what the number one question facing the Hoosiers is, and so I'm like, yeah, whether Xavier Johnson can be a championship point guard, because that's what we're talking about here. We're not talking about whether he can be a good player. I mean, he's been a good player here and there for bad teams at Pitt and for a okay team last year at Indiana. We're talking about
showed at the end of the season how good he could be.
Yeah, so he's been good. He's been a good player, but can he be a championship point guard? So anyway, I opened up the story from the Star, and I think it was written by Zach Osterman. And the biggest question that was cited was 3-point shooting, and I'm like, "Ooh, I got that one wrong." And I put it out on Twitter that I got it wrong, and so then Matt asked me what did I thought, and I said, can Xavier Johnson be a championship point guard? And look, I understand that Jalen Hood-Schifino has point guard ability and that he could, take over in a pinch or whatever, but team dynamics are a factor, and if you're having to replace your senior point guard with a freshman, I mean, what are the odds that you're going to be the number 7 team in the country, like Sporting News just predicted today, or that you're going to win the Big Ten championship like the Big Ten writers predicted back a month ago? That's what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about whether or not they can be good. They're going to be good, but can they be a league champion? And they finish like if Purdue somehow goes 15 and 15, and Purdue and Indiana finishes 14-6, or 16 and 4, and Indiana goes 15 and 5. I mean, they've still been a championship level team, whether they did it or not. But that's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about not going 13 and 7 and then losing in the second round of the NCAAs. That's what they're trying to avoid. And so Xavier Johnson, what I've been saying all along through this winter, especially when you go from February being benched for a curfew violation, and then does that solve everything? Do we straighten ourselves out? No, we have the incident in April. So that's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about being a consistent leader, winner person through the entirety of the college basketball season. That's what he has to do. He has to be someone that they can rely upon to be there, to be, and being there means not getting benched at Northwestern and not having this circumstance from April. That's what being there means. And so he has to do that. And then he has to play winning basketball, not just on, the biggest night or whatever, or half of the Michigan game. He's got to do it. And look, everybody's going to have bad games, but he's got to be a consistent winning player day after day after day in practice, night after night after night in games. And if he's that, everything that we suspect Indiana can achieve, they can achieve. And that's why I cited that. I got heck from on Twitter from Jalen's uncle, Drew, who was from Pittsburgh and played at West Virginia. I got from some fans, but that's my point. I'm not saying that they don't have skilled point guards. I know they do because I've seen Xavier do it, and I know that Jalen can. But it doesn't work if Xavier fails or struggles, and then Jalen has to take over. You're not likely then to be the championship level team that people are hoping for, and in some cases, many cases, expecting.
To that point, there was a comment that was made yesterday, and I didn't get to weigh in on this, but one of our viewers said that Xavier Johnson won't win you any games, but he can lose you some games. And I kind of understand that premise, but I think he can win you a lot of games.
Absolutely.
I think, and I'm going to say this, but it's not on the same level scale, so bear with me. I think he can be a Carson Edwards, Ayo Dosunmu type of player in that he could go out, I feel like, on any given night and put up 25 or 30 points. And he could overcorrect for a lot of things. But with that, I think he can also be very inconsistent. There's going to be with high volume shooters, which I think he is proving to be. You're going to have some nights where you go 1 for 12. You're going to have some nights where you're 4 for 15. Can he do other things on the floor when he's not shooting well? Because I think that's been an issue. When he's not shooting the ball well, he's played out of control, and that's where he costs Indiana some games. That's where I think he might have some issues. I just think there's going to be some inconsistency there throughout the course of the season, and I'm just interested to see. Maybe his game has changed. Maybe Mike Woodson has reined it in, and it's hard to take this from a one-game sample size, but what was he, Jim? 2 for 11 the other night?
2 for 11.
Something? Yeah. I just think that he's going to have some of those nights. Everybody is.
Well,
but
that's
magnified
okay,
when you're a point
like you said,
guard.
everybody is, but
right.
It wasn't nice it wasn't exactly reassuring to see it on the very first night, especially when everyone else, because if you take that off, Indiana as a team probably shot about 65%. Everyone else, Jalen Hood-Schifino was 5 of 8. Logan Duncan was 5 of 8 because he's a big guy. CJ Gunn was 2 of 5, including 2 of 3 from behind the arc. So yeah, that 2 of 11 goes exactly to where I think that when things aren't going well, that he has a tendency to press things. And that's where that gets outside of the flow of the team. And that's the one thing this team looked very good at to me the other night, even though they didn't have Trace Jackson Davis and Tamar Bates. They looked very in sync with each other. I
think he's got to learn that there are certain numbers that they can't afford, and especially when you're surrounded now by talented players. I mean, now that you've added Malik Reneau and Jalen Hood-Schifino, I mean, you have the ability to be playing with 3 5-star guys at once. That's not been the case in the program for a while. And I don't know that will be the case often. I mean, but there'll be certainly there'll be times when he's out there with Jalen and Malik and Trace if Race is on the bench for a period of time. And so you're talking about playing with 3 5-star guys. You're talking about playing with Race, who's a proven college basketball player now. There shouldn't be many 5 of 15s or 3 of 12s because it's not dropping. All right, I got other things I can do, and I know that I can get the ball to those guys who, maybe they're having a good night. If he's going 5 for 15, then everybody else ought to be worse because now you're doing it because no one else is doing it. And that shouldn't happen very often. He's got to learn and he's got to execute the idea that look, there are going to be some 2 for 9s.
Yeah.
And that's okay because, you shouldn't not shoot. But at a certain point, if it's not dropping for you, you can't go 2 for 12. You can't go 2 for 15 or 3 for 15. And that's something that a lot of college basketball players who are high usage players struggle with. If you look at his game logs for last year, you'll see that in some of those games, I mean, he went when he played against Wyoming in the NCAA tournament, he was only 3 for 12, but he also had 7 assists. And he got 5 free throws in that game and converted 3. So he's there, there he's high usage, but he's also involving his teammates. To be a great college point guard, again, like go 3 of 9 and get that assist up to 8 assists instead of wasting 3 possessions on shots that it's not your night to make. And I think that's something that he's going to have to learn. And now you have the ability to move Schifino over for minutes at a time. And maybe if it has to be the coach that enforces it, he has to be the one to say, if you're going to keep doing this, I'm going to have to play Jalen. That's how another way to govern that. A year ago, you're playing him 36, 33, 32 minutes because you don't have any other options to get the ball up and get you into the offense. Now you do. And so that may be a way as well of enforcing that and getting him to buy into that habit of understanding that if this isn't your night and your first, if 4 of your first 5 shots don't drop, then at that point, you've got to say, okay, let's get everybody else involved and maybe I can get free for a layup and that'll get me going again. But you can't sit there and push yourself to 3 of 12, 3 of 13. Just because you can't think of anything else to do. Well, now the coach can say, okay, you can't think of anything else to do. I've got a freshman who's got great skill who can do this.
Yeah, last year was the most games he had played in his career in a season by 134 games. He averaged 28 minutes a game. He shot 40% from the floor and surprisingly 38% from behind the arc. And I think a lot of that came at the end of the season when he got a little more comfortable and started playing a little more within himself in the confines. But, he averaged 5 assists a game. That's a solid stat line for a guy that's a senior that you're looking at going, wow, this is going to be awesome. But they have to all work together. And that's the thing that in watching that team the other night, I saw a lot of in syncness, like I said. But of course, you've got Malik Renew and Jalen Hood-Schifino, who have played in high school together. But this team looked pretty in sync, although they were missing a couple of pieces. So again, it's hard to address that in its totality. But to me, they looked good, although it was against an NAIA team. It has to be encouraging to see Logan Duncombe come in and get a double-double, even though, again, it's against an NAIA team. But, this is your third option off in his position.
Yeah, let me reiterate that I really respect Xavier's talent. I mean, I remember, I have, because of growing up in Pittsburgh and covering Pitt. So I had an eye on him early on. I saw one of his early practices, visited the practice to talk to Jeff Capel and to watch him go. And there's real talent there. I mean, there was talk in Pittsburgh after, during his freshman year, how long is he going to be here? Not in the sense of, is he going to leave for Indiana, but is he going to leave for the NBA? And so I think that you have to remember there's real ability there. But again, it comes down to how does he execute? How does he use the ability that he has? And if he does, if he has a great year, Indiana's going to be terrific. I mean, it's that simple because everything else is in place for them to be really good. The shooting is an issue, but you can work around that. They're going to score points. And Xavier himself is, as you mentioned, 38%. You'll take that every day from any player that you have, with the exception of J.J. Redick. I mean, 38% is a great percentage from three-point range. So he's got ability to make shots as well as get into the lane and draw the defense to himself and kick it out or or drop it down to race or trace. He's got real ability. And so I'm excited to see what he becomes this year. I think he has a chance to be an all-league point guard, but it's really up to him as much as anybody. It's up to Xavier how great he wants to be.